mind, I had this feeling that I could take more risks since I didn't have very long to live anyway. A kind of who cares, a logical approach that has gotten me through many crises in life. State Medical knew about the CLL diagnosis and downgraded me to a 2 medical clearance, but didn't stop me from going overseas, mainly because the jobs I was volunteering for often had no takers. So I wanted to connect the Cuban embassy attacks. Well, let's go. Okay, I need to read William Andreas Brown's his narrative on what happened. William Andreas Brown discusses the widespread concern among Americans working at the embassy at the time, and their anger at the State Department for its lack of transparency on the issue, excerpted from his oral history interview conducted by Charles Stewart Kennedy beginning in November 1998. William Andreas Brown: I have to tell you what a shock it was in about 1972 or 1973 to wake up to the great microwave scandal and to find that the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and his associates had kept from us the fact that for years we had been bombarded by microwave apparatuses directed straight at the embassy in Moscow. I remember being one of the small group of officers in 1972 or 1973 when news of this development broke. We raised our voices in despair, dissent, and so forth. We were finally ushered into a room where Larry Eagleburger, Kissinger's special assistant at the time, briefed us and made some sort of presentation, assuring us that steps would be taken and so forth. He said that the medical studies were underway, and the evidence thus far was that these microwaves had not been deleterious to our health. This was somewhat reassuring until at the end of the meeting, Larry Eagleburger said, "Now rip up all of your notes and give them to me. Nobody can leave with notes on this discussion." One said to oneself, what in the hell is going on here? It turned out that the Soviets had been bombarding us with microwaves beginning in about 1964 or 1965. Why they had done this remained a mystery. How they had bombarded our embassy remained somewhat of a mystery, as well as why they had done so. Also a mystery was what was the response. We were furious. We felt betrayed by the leadership of the Department of State and by the Secretary of State himself. I'm speaking now of the microwave radiation scandal, as I call it, of the early 1970s, which harked back to the early 1960s. Many of us who had served in the embassy felt betrayed, as people had put so much into our efforts and who had volunteered to serve in Moscow. We probably would have volunteered anyway to serve in Moscow, even if we had known about this. However, we learned only years later that this had happened and that information on it had been kept from us. Foreign Service physical examinations routinely include a blood test. Unbeknownst to us, the Department of State was testing our blood to see what, if anything, had happened to us as a result of the microwave radiation. This was a pretty jolting realization. Question: before we leave that matter, was consideration ever given to our saying to the Soviets, if you keep up this nonsense, we will close our embassy in Moscow? Brown: or we could say, if the Soviets kept up this nonsense, we would do exactly the same thing to the Soviet embassy in Washington. But oh no, that would have been nasty, and nothing like that was done. We felt pretty strongly about this. It affected morale and assignments to positions in the embassy. Question: what was the purpose of what has to be regarded as this campaign by Soviet authorities against the health of members of the staff of the American Embassy in Moscow? Brown: this takes you into realms that I'm really not qualified to discuss. I was aware of various theories of measures and countermeasures that might be taken. However, the point is that microwave emissions were being beamed at us. This point came home to me particularly one day when a visiting technician from the State Department came with equipment and said, "Do you mind if I set this up in your office?" I said, "Okay, but why here? Why in my office?" He said, "Because actually there are at least 2 beams directed at the embassy. One comes in from the front of the embassy building, and one comes in from that great white building over there, which is called the White House. You know, where the Russian Parliament meets. One beam comes this way, and 2 beams intersect right here at your desk, so I'd like to set this up." I thought, my God, it makes you think. But the Soviets were turning these beams off. This was a disturbing development. As I said, it affected assignments to positions in the embassy in Moscow, as well as other things. So I wanted to read that, and that started in, they said 1964, 1965, and continued into the 80s, that the Soviet Union was beaming microwave radiation, non-ionizing microwave radiation, into the U.S. Embassy there. And it was a huge scandal back then, and all over the mainstream news. And now, now we're hearing things about the Cuban embassy attack, and it's all over. And I'll show you if you look up in Google, and this is pretty, let's see, if I'm just going to open a new page, because I got some stuff there. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new page, but, just go to Google and put in Cuba, without the N, Cuba. Well, you can put in either one, Cuban embassy attack or Cuba embassy attack. And there are so many articles up till October, and there's probably some more recent ones. I will read another one, but this is just all over. It's all over CNN. It's all over the mainstream networks. It's staying in the news. We need to connect this with things that have happened in history. In the history of the U.S. Embassy in Russia. I'm going to do a video. I think my next video, I'm going to do 2 videos today. On my next video, there's a longer article that I want to read, and I'll try and get it so you can see it a little bit, but on the Russian woodpecker effect, and them actually beaming some of these frequencies to America to basically research mind control. With frequencies, with electromagnetic frequencies. But I did just want to show you these. I guess I can go through a little bit of the other article I'd opened up, and this was the I was talking about Bill Binney last night. He's the CIA director, met with DNC hack conspiracy theorist at Trump's urging. I kind of just want to go through. Well, I might go through that on a video in itself, but that's really important. And TIs around the globe who maybe don't know a lot about American politics. Bill Binney, Trump, the president of the United States, assigned Bill Binney to go and talk to the head of the CIA and to the heads of some of the other agencies about the DNC hack. Because Bill Binney did not think that it was Russia who did it. But that's a huge thing, guys, and especially TIs that are not American. Bill Binney is the one who's heading up the global TI survey. So he's in mainstream media. He has connections to Donald Trump, our president, and he also, has connections within some of the heads of the intelligence agencies. And also in the medical industry he has connections. So this is very, very hopeful, that Trump is assigning him, to go and talk to the head of the CIA. Very, very hopeful. And this is, I'm gonna do the next video on that, because I want to kind of try and focus here. There's just so much news about this stuff. I guess I'll go ahead and read some of this. I'm getting to 30 minutes. I have to use the bathroom so bad. I just used the bathroom too. So this is remote neural manipulation. They're sending a frequency to a certain part of my brain. It's affecting my autonomic nervous system, and it makes me feel like I have to use the bathroom. So they can force you to make you have to use the bathroom either way by certain kinds of entrainment with these frequencies. So this one says, illnesses at U.S. Embassy in Havana prompt evacuation of more diplomats. And this was from September 29, 2017, so it was a little bit further back. I'll read some of it till I get to about the close of this one, but just Google Cuban embassy attacks and look up the most recent articles, and there's some very interesting information, TIs. Please put some videos out about them. Just doing editorializing, stating what you think is going on. And the mystery deepens on that other one, because a lot of the things that they were complaining of could not be picked up with a an audio recorder. And that's the problems that TIs around the world have. We hear that high-pitched tinnitus-like sound in our ears. We have pains in the head and all over the body. And it's the high-pitched sound, a lot of more well-versed TIs, say that that's a form of basically censorship. It's traumatizing. It's making it hard for you to think, so that they can, carry out other things like remote neural manipulation, actual visual injection, putting things in your visual space. Like, because when you think of a visual thought, it's a electromagnetic frequency in your brain. So they're using electromagnetic frequencies and microwaves and radio frequencies to manipulate things that are going on with your brain and your nervous system. So I want to, people who are interested in the Cuban embassy attack and may not know about targeted individuals and see this as a mystery, these things that they're doing have a very, they have a purpose of traumatizing whoever that they're targeted on, censoring thought, clearing neural pathways, and then doing things like, they can read signals from the brain and the nervous system, but they can also send back signals to the brain and the nervous system too. I guess I'm getting close to the end, but I will go ahead and read some of this. Washington. It started as a medical mystery. It then was determined to have been the result of a mysterious attack, and on Friday, the illness that has affected 21 diplomats at the American Embassy in Havana, with symptoms including hearing loss and cognitive difficulties, threatened the future of Cuban-American relations. With no guarantee that Cuban government could protect American diplomats, the State Department announced that it was withdrawing all non-essential personnel from the embassy. In a statement, Secretary of State Rex W. Tillerson repeated the American assertion that the embassy personnel were deliberately targeted, but he did not blame Cuba, and officials held out the possibility that a third party might have been responsible. Cuba has told us it will continue to investigate these attacks, and we will continue to cooperate with them in this effort, Mr. Tillerson said. But the Trump administration, which has already expelled 2 Cuban diplomats over the illnesses, is considering further retaliatory steps, according to congressional staff briefed by the administration officials. And the State Department issued an advisory that Americans should not travel to Cuba because some of the attacks occurred in hotels where State Department employees were temporarily staying. Officials said they worried that tourists and others could have been affected. The Cuban government responded with dismay while promising to continue to cooperate in investigation, calling Friday's decision hasty and that will affect the bilateral relations. While there is no evidence so far that tourists or hotel employees have been affected, the government's travel warning could cripple Cuba's burgeoning tourism industry if tour operators, hotel and cruise line companies, or their insurers decide that their employees and customers could be at risk. Right now, the most important constituency of determining the impact of this is not members of Congress or pundits, it's the insurance companies, said John Kavulich, the president of the U.S.-Cuba Trade and Economic Council. If the carriers withdraw coverage because of this warning, then everything could shut down there almost overnight. I'll read this last paragraph before I have to end the video. The timing of Mr. Tillerson's decision and its potential fallout promises to write yet another chapter in an extraordinary history between the two countries that has included the explosion of the American battleship Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898, the Bay of Pigs in 1961, and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Alright guys, so I just wanted to go through these articles, and I'm going to go through some more Cuban embassy attack articles this month, definitely. But you should really check out this one with the new audio, because it really explains how, infrasound was used, which it's used on a lot of TIs. And now I have to use the bathroom so urgently that it's definitely a remote neural manipulation related thing. Alright guys, I'm going to have to go ahead and end the video, but this is definitely information that our attackers, that these third-party contractors in the DoD don't want us putting out. They don't want us connecting dots for the American public. And all these, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up on this one. I'll talk about it more on the next video. Might make another video today. But God is behind us. Let's keep getting info.